Hello again, it's Bagoon with the third episode of my Age of Mythology trigger series. We're still in the basics section and I think it's time we move on to unit movement. So I've got a militia here, I've got two cinematic blocks and I'd like to get my militia to move to one of the blocks. What I will do, I'll have an always active high priority trigger and I will ask the unit to move to unit. So the militia is going to move to the cinematic block. You can also have move to point, where the unit will move to an area you specify. It's usually more precise to use units, and you can move them around and change the position quite easily later on. If we play this, we'll see our militia will diligently move to the first block and then stop. This is quite simple and straightforward. What we could do now is we could set up a patrol effect. So what I'd like to do is get the militia to move to the second block. And we've got a couple of ways of doing this. First of all, you see we can link triggers here. So if I put this in, it means that after the unit has completed its movement, it will immediately fire this trigger. This trigger has a condition of always, so it will begin moving to the second block as soon as it reaches the first. As I've linked these triggers now, you'll see that trigger 1 is active, trigger 2 is now inactive, as I mentioned in the very first video. If we have a look at this, you'll see moving to block 1 and then instantly moving over to block 2 and then stopping. If we were to create a patrol, what we would do is link block 2 back to block 1. However, if we play the scenario now, nothing's going to happen. The reason for this is I linked the first block trigger to the second block trigger and now they are both inactive by default. If I activate the first block, I now get my intended effect of a patrol between both the blocks, which is just going to continue. As you can see, that's happening quite nicely. This will allow you to create unit patrol behaviours in your maps, and that's something we can expand upon. If you wanted a third block, that would be quite easily done. Again, you'd move block number 3, and note that naming is quite important here so I know what I'm doing. The militia would be moving to this block and then going back to block 1, but after block 2 I need to tell them to move to block 3. So now I've created a three-way patrol, which is being nicely demonstrated here. There are other move commands in the game as well. Rather than move to point and move to unit, we've also got the teleport units effect. In the original this didn't work online, but luckily now it does. However, it generates a lot of network traffic. This means more than a few teleport triggers firing at once will create a lot of lag, so we really advise you to only do this sparingly. So I'm going to ask my unit to move to this block or area. There's also a teleport unit to unit where I can teleport it directly to the block. If I put a timer condition in here of 2 seconds, you'll see this is quite a useful trigger. After 2 seconds, the unit is instantly teleported over there, and that looks fantastic. However, if the unit is moving at the time of the teleport trigger, it won't fire. So in order for a teleport trigger to work, the unit must be stationary. There's 2 ways you can get around this. First of all, you could force a unit to stop moving, and the way you would do this is just command it to move to where its current location is. This can be achieved in the move relative to itself effect with 0,0, so it just tells it to move to exactly where it is. This can also unfortunately be quite troublesome, so there is another workaround to this, which is immediate garrison. This garrisons the militia in a different unit, but ignores distance. Normally to garrison you'd have to be very close. So what I'm going to do is say for this unit to immediately garrison in this cinematic block. However, cinematic blocks don't have a garrison capacity, so I'm going to change it to something that does, such as a rock, and then I'm going to immediately change it back into a cinematic block. The timer 2 is still there, so now you see even if we're moving, after 2 seconds, we're immediately teleported over there. The order of these effects matter, as they will run in chronological order. If I have my effects out of order, say I'm immediately garrisoning in and then changing into a rock, you can see nothing's going to happen because I've told my militia to garrison inside a cinematic block. That's not possible. What's happened is it's changed into a cinematic block and it's also changed into a rock. Conditions and effects follow an order and it's important to get it right. Unfortunately, there's no way of reordering this, so if you did this the wrong way round, what you'd have to do is copy the cinematic block change, copy the garrison change, and then delete everything in the correct order until you get what you want. A quick note with linking triggers: you may be aware it's possible to link triggers after a camera track has finished, after a sound has finished playing, or even after a sound has finished playing in the play dialogue trigger. You should not use any of these as they cause sync errors online. The safest bet is to use fire event. However, unit move linking triggers for the move to point and move to unit are acceptable online. You can see there's also another component apart from linking triggers, and that's the attack move option. When it's off, the unit will just move to where you've told it to move, and it will ignore enemy units that it would normally be able to attack. If you have the attack move on, it will move to the point suggested, but attack anything as soon as it comes within that unit's line of sight. So for this example, it sees the house and it's just going straight for the house to attack the house. Once the house has been destroyed, the unit will continue onwards to its final destination. And this leads me to another way you can link triggers. So if I ask my militia to move back to the starting point on the second one, if I do that, it means after the unit has completed its movement, it will move back. The other way to do it is by the fire event effect. This just links the triggers in. So what's going to happen is I'm turning attack move off. It means after 2 seconds, the militia is going to start moving to the house. 2 seconds after that, the second trigger will fire. Reason for that is, as soon as I have the fire event, this trigger is going to start working. This 2 seconds is not a game time of 2 seconds, it's 2 seconds from when the trigger is fired. If you look for further timer conditions, you'll find timer MS, which came with the maps, for milliseconds. This one unfortunately isn't too accurate, so the trigger geniuses have created the timer MS accurate, which is an accurate way of doing milliseconds. If you also look for an effect called sound timer, this does aim to do the same thing with milliseconds, but again it doesn't work accurately and causes sync errors online because of its inaccuracy. For unit movement, we also have the distance to unit and distance to point conditions, which can be quite useful. So if you click on operator, you get these functions. If you're familiar with your maths, you'll know what they mean. So this one means less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and greater than. You'll see that these aren't exactly lined up, so what it means is if the unit is greater than 0 distance to the point, it will fire. So I would expect this one to fire. And indeed it does. This can be quite useful when you're creating shop effects, so if you want the unit to be near a shop unit, if you want to check where a unit is in relation to another unit, or create more complicated unit patrol behaviours. This could mean that certain trigger fires when your unit enters a town, comes near a house, comes near another character, even goes near a tree. There's quite a lot of possibilities that you can do with this. I will now leave it to you, as always, to experiment with these distance effects. As I mentioned in my last map, the value here corresponds to meters, which is 2 tiles. So if we're working out the distance to the block, we're currently 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10 meters away from this block. Again, these distances are circular rather than square, so the best way to do it is to look at the circle brush and gradually adjust it using trial or error until you're roughly at the area which would trigger it. If you're going for size, again, that 10 is meters rather than tiles. So looking at 10 distance to unit is that sort of area that would be affected.